Okay, hello and welcome everybody to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. Let's see, Blue Moon is here. Hello. Let's see, before we get going, I just some loose ends I wanted to tie up here. Uh, there was a discussion about online EMDR and whether or not it was effective, and I had said that I would look into it. So the past week, I contacted two different professionals, one of which who had been doing EMDR only in his office, uh, so in-person sessions for over 10 years, and with COVID, had moved his practice online, and he'd said that he found online EMDR to be even more effective than in person. So, and then I asked another practitioner, and her practice has only ever been online. And I actually spoke with her first. And so she had said, "Oh yeah, online, it's wonderful. It gets fantastic results." That's why I asked another person who had in-person experience so they would have something to contrast it to. Anyways, both of them had agreed that what they had found with online EMDR is that there's subtle differences um, with the process. So in person, they might do like finger tracking or light, like using a light, which doesn't, I don't know if the word is translate, but it doesn't work as well on on a computer screen. So they use tapping, the kind of bilateral stimulation instead. And both had said that they've had very good success with it, primarily because the person is in the comfort of their own home. So they said, especially, for issues relating to anxiety, PTSD, for a person to go to a practitioner's office, that can really, understandably so, kind of excite their nervous system because they're in a new place with a new person, and and then they have to go home after that versus a person who's already at home. If home is a relatively comfortable space for them, then it can be more effective. So I thought I'd pass that along. Let's see what else. Oh, I wanted to ask you guys' opinion. So we are very behind on book club. I apologize profusely for that. And I've been thinking forever now about changing up the format. And I just wanted to kind of get some feedback from you guys. I've been working on a like like a slideshow, I guess, of sorts, in Windows Movie Maker. It's like a PowerPoint turned into a video, I guess you could say, on the one of the books that we're reading. And I was wondering what you guys would kind of think of that format with me um, reading my notes, but then also being able to see, like my top 7 or however many takeaways from the book. Would that be something that would be helpful, or do you find um, the the in-person, or I should say, Zoom chat, book club discussions more engaging, or would you like both? Or I guess what are some thoughts about what would be helpful for book club format? Embers says, Dana, thanks so much for looking into this for me. Really appreciate the extra effort. Absolutely. No problem. It was a great question and something I hadn't thought about. So I you guys keep those questions coming. It's helpful. Okay, Embers is saying, yeah, I love the movie maker idea, being a visual learner, but would love a chat too. Then UNA was saying, well, would it be interactive? Um, that is a good question. I guess I hadn't thought of doing that type of video. I don't know if I could do it interactively. I'll have to think about that. Hmm. Maybe we could do one of each. We could do the um, kind of like shorter versions. I guess here's my concern is that I know we cover a lot of ground and I know it's time consuming. That these videos are very long and I, I know there's kind of mixed thoughts on them, but I don't want to overload people with information either. I know there's lots of different videos out there and kind of, you know, um, it's a lot to sit through. So I was kind of thinking it'd be helpful to pull out the um, important bits and just have them be more concise. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. Changing My Life says, have you looked over using something like StreamYard to get people to talk on camera too, other than just chatting? No, I've never even heard of StreamYard before. Hmm. Okay. I will have to look into that. I will make a note. StreamYard. Well, thanks, Megalodoro. And hello. Says these sessions are great. They're worth every second. Please don't shorten them. Oh, I'm I'm so glad that they're helpful. UNA says, and I feel guilty asking about something where you'd have to put in more work. I'm sorry for asking. Let's see, what was your the interactive quality. No, please don't apologize at all. This is the direction that I was hoping these answers would go in is what would be helpful. And there's so much out there that I just am not aware of. Uh, like as you guys know, that my uh, level of technology proficiency is probably really low compared to most people that have YouTube channels. So I'm kind of limping by on this, but I would like to be able, um, I just want to provide helpful information in a way that's you know user friendly, I guess. Magalodora says, I missed the question. I just logged in. Well, the original question had to do with book club. And I've been thinking about changing up the format for a while now, um, to kind of condense the information in the books that we cover. So, um, so I don't know, kind of making my notes more concise to where it's maybe like my top 7 takeaways or what have 11 takeaways or whatever it might be from each book, kind of condensing them into, a numerical format and then having it be more of like a scripted video, I guess is what I'm saying. That would maybe be 15 minutes long instead of an hour and a half. But then some people were saying they liked the chat part of it, like the interactiveness of the chat. So I'm open. Let's see. Oh, really? Jack says, I can do this with Zoom. This having people talk. Does it does it show their face and does it show their name? I guess my main concern with that would be privacy concerns. Magalodora says, oh, I haven't figured out when your book club sessions are yet. The time zones drive me crazy. For instance, it's 10 a.m. here. Gotcha. Well, it's not just the time zones. Book club has been a challenge, gosh, from pretty much day one. Been a challenge in a wide variety of ways. So it's normally the last Thursday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which would be 8 a.m. your time. Um, but we haven't had it in about 1 or 2 months. So I mean, I read all the books, I have all the notes. Like, I just need to figure out what I'm doing here and kind of get things more organized. So, oh, okay. Michelle says with Zoom, you can turn off your own video. The host doesn't have to require it. Whereas, okay, StreamYard, you're able to let people in, for example, taking turns. It looks like Zoom, people can raise their hand. I guess the challenge with that would be how would you handle um, trolls that would get in there? And would there be, can another person moderate in there? Like, could I have moderators helping me out? I, because I would imagine that that would be a thing, that would be a concern. And could the moderators also, when people are waiting in line, um, or I guess not waiting in line, like, um, joining the chat or whatever, is there, there probably is a place where they could chat, right? So the moderators could let them know, "Hey, um, you know, if you don't want your video on, or if you don't want your face to be seen, turn your video off, or you might want to consider changing your name," or these kinds of things. Okay. Jack is saying, "It sounds like I'd have an easier time looking into StreamYard to have more of the control that you're looking for." Embers, you know, I don't I don't know. That's a good question. Oh my gosh. Uh, Asks, "Do you send book club notices on your email list?" And I I I don't know. I know that there's a calendar up on my website. Um, but as far as the email notices, like as far as the book we're reading or when it is or these kinds of things? Right. Magladora was saying, yeah, people forget to turn off their videos a lot on Zoom. Yeah, that would be my concern would be that somebody would accidentally have their video. It, it's easy to do if I mean to have your name on there and not realize like what's actually public information, and to think to just think things are different, and the next thing a person knows they've you know kind of provided too much information, or they're in a panic. Hold on, let me turn off the volume on my phone here. I thought I got that and I didn't. There we go. Okay, some people are asking, how do we join your email list? If you head over to thriveafterabuse.com, you should see a sign up there for joining the email list. And then, yeah, I guess let me know what you would like to be emailed with, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, Changing My Life was saying that she really likes that Richard Grandin uses the format with the StreamYard or with Zoom or some sort of format where you can hear from the audience, and that she likes that. Okay, I'll look into that. I like that idea in theory, as long as we can just make sure that people where safety is a concern, that that's that's being provided. That's the only challenge with going live. Um, and I mean, I deal with this day in and day out on the Facebook group when people don't realize, oh my gosh, I posted this here. I didn't realize that so and so could see it, and please delete it. And they're in a mad panic. And I just think it would be times 100 if it was a video. Let's see. XB, thank you for the live stream donation with the cute little pear emoji. Says, how's it going? It's going. It is going. How are you? How are things? Alicia is saying, I have Zoom set up to ask me whether or not I want to have my video on right before I enter a meeting. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to figure something out. Okay. Yeah, I saw that, Jack. I'm so glad that Angie got that sorted out yesterday. Um, yeah, I don't know what happened. I can't see anything. Uh, like I can't see the back end on obviously on her channel. I'm not even sure if I'd be able to see. Well, I guess I would be the only one that could block a user on my chat. I'm not even sure what all I can see on my channel. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up. Huffle Mom is saying, oh, really? Michelle, is this for Zoom? I think you're talking about Zoom. Says, okay, people can raise their hand. The host turns on their microphone. Otherwise, people can be muted. I do like that ability, just in case somebody, you've got a rogue troll that's going wild in there. And she says, oh, and then you can also have a waiting room. I do like that idea. I like the idea of people kind of being prepped a little bit before we go live for all of the privacy reasons I mentioned. Huffle Mom says we're reading a book called Boundaries. The only difficulty for some is that it's heavily influenced by a Christian standpoint. Is that the book by Henry Cloud? I know he has a series on um, boundaries, but it is very heavily Christian. Um, yeah, Magalodora says I wouldn't read that. Yeah, and to um, to some extent, if books have a little bit of religion or kind of author's perspective thrown in, I'm okay with it. I tried reading one of his books about boundaries, and it was so heavily Christian to me that it it was difficult to even sort out the message from um what he was saying. I just felt like making it so heavily geared towards Christians, there it just wasn't. Not only was it not necessary, I just didn't find it helpful. Yeah. And I would agree. Magalodora says, personally, I avoid reading books influenced by ideologies. Yeah. Let's see. Gina was saying boundaries apply to mostly Christians. Yes, if you're not a Christian, you won't relate. Well, I think boundaries apply to everybody. Um, and it's not, it doesn't, I think you can have scripture to kind of back up your point of view. But yeah, I would agree. Helpful Mom was saying that she's Christian and she finds the constant quotation of scriptures in a self-help book somewhat off-putting. Yeah, I agree. And Angela was saying, I don't think they mean to exclude people, but it's nice as a Christian to have a book that has to do with boundaries. And I can absolutely see that point as well. So I am in that sense because it is important. Boundaries, the concept of boundaries are very important, and religious, spiritual abuse is a thing. And there are people, you know, um, a lot, even Christians, that get very tangled up in skewed versions of scripture that, uh, oh, like that just kind of skew them into staying in real like abusive or toxic relationships with family members or with their spouse or whatnot. And so there definitely is a need for healthy, accurate self-help, you know, that speaks to Christians. Let's see. Silver Storm says, what do you do if your abuser is using the police? I was falsely arrested, the charges were dropped, and then followed with false order of protection. I am the victim, and he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder last year. Outside of potentially filing a restraining order against him, I don't think that there's, or moving, I don't think that there's a whole lot you can do. Um, those are really the only two ways that I can think of that can really limit his behavior. So, keeping a record of things that you're encountering with him and, uh, just contacting the police. I don't know. I would file a report, I guess is what I'm saying, and probably go for a restraining order or at least some sort of order stating that you feel like you're being harassed by this person, that this is not true. And these are false charges and, um, all of this. And then just steer very clear of him as much as you possibly can. Grisbear says, "It took me over 4 years to finally set my boundaries." Yes, and I would add too that that's a process it's ongoing, and it's interesting. The relationships that tend to cause us tremendous amounts of pain are the ones that are the entry point to us understanding boundaries or examining our own or tightening them up. But then it's pulling a string on a sweater too, uh, where we realize, oh my gosh, it's not just with this one person, it's probably with multiple people. And that can feel kind of discouraging and overwhelming, but at the same time, it can also be uh, kind of exciting because it's absolutely life changing when your boundaries become an accurate reflection of uh, of self-protection, of like what's nourishing for you and kind of keeping out what's toxic or draining for you. That's when your life really starts to work. And it's exciting when that happens. And then you kind of want to do more of that because things just start running smoothly. And uh, yeah, it's it's just such an easier way to live. Mystique says, I'm learning boundaries as well. You don't realize over the years that you lose them while in an abusive relationship. Absolutely. That's one of the, oh boy, the biggest challenges I think after abuse and something that people struggle with would be the loss of, not even loss, like complete erosion of their boundaries and their erosion of their sense of self. And it's very difficult to have boundaries. You know, boundaries, it's self-protection. But if our sense of self, especially our sense of self-worth has been eroded, where another person's been blaming us for their mistreatment all this time, if we don't feel that we have value, then we're not going to be motivated to take protective action, to guard ourselves. So then it kind of becomes this anything goes where we continually put up with mistreatment, not even realizing that it's mistreatment. And so kind of um, shedding these disempowering beliefs and disempowering all of this garbage that's been put on, uh, just layers of dysfunction that have been put onto a person during abuse, getting rid of all of that and reconnecting with your boundaries and with your worth as a person. And um it's, I mean, like I said, it's just absolutely game changing, but it's a process. It's absolutely a process. And, I think it really just begins with realizing that th- respect and dignity, it's not something that you have to earn. It's an inherent, I would say, human right, but it's even more than that. I think it's just an inherent right that any living creature is born with, is that respect and dignity. And it's the basics of appropriate behavior. So, but in an abusive household, it's very much this attitude of, uh, I'm not gonna treat you like you've got to earn it, right? If they mistreat you, then it's your fault, and it's gonna continue to be your fault until you somehow prove to them that you're worth being treated reasonably. And that's outrageous. It's outrageously inappropriate. It wouldn't fly in any other environment. It doesn't fly in a work environment. It doesn't, or at least it shouldn't, right? It doesn't work that way with friends, uh, you know, places you might volunteer, other other types of dynamics. So yeah, it's not something that needs to be earned. It's the basics of adult behavior, and fully realizing that is a big step. Yes. Okay. And you bring up a great point. So UNA says, however, respect can be lost. Yes. And so this is one of the kind of the shortcomings of the English language is is when you have words, uh, the kind of verb versus what would be that, like, different parts of speech. So to have respect, like in terms of a noun, I have respect, person, place, or thing, right? I have this respect for a person. Having respect for a person is something that's earned, right? Treating a person respectfully is basics of adult behavior. So adverb versus noun, I guess, is the difference there. Treating somebody respectfully, that's appropriate. It doesn't matter how frustrated or angry somebody gets, there's still this expectation that people behave in a mature way. If we're waiting in line at, I don't know, um, in at a store and our patience is growing thinner by the moment, we still expect people to wait patiently. Having a meltdown, throwing a temper tantrum, demanding to see the manager, storming around, knocking over stuff, that's not allowed, and it's really frowned upon, and it's viewed as the emotionally immature behavior that it is. So, there's lots of people we might not have respect for. There's lots of people I don't have respect for, but I would still treat them respectfully just because that's just kind of the basics of adult behavior, and that's how we interact with people, you know? Okay, let's see here. Oh, okay. Jack relaying the message, from Gareth saying Gareth, I think, Gareth, was asking for some book club recommendations. Yes, I am always open for some book club recommendations. Absolutely. Okay, Silver Storm. Okay, let's see. Oh gosh, hold on, there's some good questions in here. Let me scroll up. Michelle makes the comment, "It's so hard to be cool when your boundaries are being violated." Let me see. Shay. Okay, great question. Says, "I grew up in an intrusive and boundaryless family. Do you have suggestions on how to avoid answering intrusive, albeit sometimes innocent questions without being defensive?" Yeah. I mean, and the reality is you feel how you feel. And I if you might feel defensive in the moment, and that's okay. Um, it can help in general, I think, to have some sort of kind of, like I don't know, like prepared response to questions, especially if it's the same people that tend to ask questions that are just overstepping your lines. So you could say something like, "Oh, it's a long story." Just leave it vague. "Oh, it's a long story. Just don't have time for that today." Or, "Oh boy, I'd really rather not get into that." And just leave it at that. And most people will kinda just back up when you say something like that. Yeah, I would just really rather not get into all that. Like, I think that covers it. Let's see here. Let me scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, Grizz Bear's talking about boundaries and says, "And now I need to be sure that my boundaries don't become walls." Yes. This is a process, you might have heard me talk about it before as kind of getting your sea legs with boundaries. It's a process and it's very common. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do it any other way, frankly, myself included, where if a person goes from having no boundaries or very porous boundaries, odds are they've been a doormat for a very long time. They've been pushed around, they've been walked over. There's a lot of built up anger and frustration there. And when they finally had enough, they tend to lash out, and it's just this reactivity that comes out. And so then then they swing from being passive to aggressive, and they mistake being aggressive with being assertive. because it just takes time and practice learning how to actually be assertive. So then they go to being aggressive, and part of that aggressiveness um, is is turning these boundaries into walls. It's also known as fortressing. So keeping other people, basically keeping other people out in order to keep ourselves safe. So hold on just a second here. Whew, sorry about that. I had a tickle in my throat. So yes, so fortressing is, it's very rigid, and so softening that up and realizing, okay, it's okay for boundaries to be, uh, I guess, appropriately flexible, and that's where it just takes time and practice to get to figure out, what does that look like? What does appropriately flexible look like? Uh, you know, but the reality is only you have that answer. So it's getting very grounded within yourself and figuring out getting clear with yourself of what is nourishing and what is draining for you, and what a healthy boundary looks like for you at that point in time. And that boundary might change over time too. So, and that's okay. I mean, it's your life, right? So, like, the decisions and the decisions that you make are your own. So, yeah, other people don't get to vote because they don't have to live with the consequences. Okay. Oh, this is a great question. Mystique asks, Dana, how can you tell the difference between love and a trauma bond? I would say it's the actions underneath. So if you think about love in terms of, you've probably heard this before, love is an action word. And it's very true. Love is an action word. It's not simply an emotion. So love, it's uh, kind of going back to some scripture, it's patient, it's kind, it's understanding, it's supportive, it's nourishing, it's a safe and secure feeling. It's a deep appreciation for another person. It's uh, it's nourishing, really. It's seeing the uniqueness in another person, and um, contributing to their growth, and vice versa. So it's this very, like, healthy, positive, nourishing, safe and secure mm, place that's created, I guess, in terms of a relationship. Trauma bond is feelings of intensity that are often confused for love. So it's trauma bonds, it's all of the fear of loss and the anxiety of the lows, and then the relief of the highs of, okay, it's the fear of, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from my partner in 24 hours and they've never gone this long before. Did they find somebody else? Are they mad at me? What's going on? Um, and then all of the panic and fear that that can generate in somebody, especially, and we'll get into this more in this next book club with attachment styles, but for anxiously attached people, these trauma bonds can be very, very strong. And because they already have this anxious style of attaching or bonding to other people. And if they're with a partner who is more on that avoidance side, which a lot of manipulative people tend to be, where they're doing this push pull, and they're enjoying seeing their partner kind of twist in the wind because it makes them feel significant. Um, it's just such a toxic dynamic. But so one of the quotes in the book that we're going to be discussing for book club just sums it up so perfectly. The author says, an activated attachment style is not love. And that's just one of those like drops mic kind of moments of that's exactly right. So the trauma bonds are forged between the, you know, um, the fear of loss and the relief of things continuing. So it's basically forged in large part due to fear. There's fear and fear of loss, and that those feelings, that's not an ongoing thing in a secure relationship. And this is also why after these intense relationships with highly manipulative people, people struggle with um, other relationships feeling really flat, and especially if they're in a relationship with a securely attached person, because securely attached people, they're consistent, they're reliable, they don't play games. There aren't these highs and lows. There's not this fear of loss. There isn't this constant wondering, and then you know there isn't this makeup breakup kind of thing, or you don't hear from them for 24 hours and then all of a sudden they do reappear, and then you're relieved of, oh, thank goodness they're not mad at me. These kinds of things. Like where you stand. But for somebody who's gone through that trauma bond, and in all fairness too, movies really show these trauma bonds as this is what love is supposed to look like. And it's so not. Like this isn't love. Love doesn't destroy you. Love doesn't hurt. Love doesn't mistreat you. Love isn't vicious or destructive or cruel or toxic. Those are all trauma bonds. And it's generally a sign of uh, an anxious style of attachment that's been activated in one of these relationships. Um, Embers was saying, I was going to read Boundaries, but wanted something less Christian. Any suggestions? Yes. Let me think. Okay. The three books that come to mind are um, there's a book called Boundaries by Adeline Birch. It's a quick read. I'm talking maybe an hour. And it's great. She just cuts to the chase and does a really great job of this is what boundaries are and this is what they're not. And it's a good introduction, I think, to boundaries. For a deeper dive, Pia Melody has two books. I think all of her stuff is fantastic. So, um, you know, take that into consideration. But uh, she has a book called Facing Intimacy and then another one called Facing Codependence. And they're both fantastic. And I want to say it's the Facing Intimacy one that talks about boundaries in a deep dive that I had never thought of before. So and I'm pretty sure it's that book. She had mentioned boundaries in terms of like we have a wide variety of boundaries. We have physical boundaries. We have emotional boundaries. We have psychological boundaries. We have, um, you know, like we also, boundaries are what we put out into the world and then also what we let in. And I really liked that she talked about him in that sense. And it was very game changing for me. Um, so like the whole boundaries in terms of what we let in. So an example of this would be, let's say somebody says something hurtful. They are teasing you or they just say something mean. So a healthy boundary would be to not let that in. And what that means, and you probably have heard with the Eleanor Roosevelt quote of, no one can make us feel inferior without our consent. What that means is talking about that boundary of what we're letting in. So we feel how we feel. It's normal, reasonable, understandable if somebody says something hurtful and we get our feelings hurt. And we're like, ouch, yikes, especially if there's some truth to that. Someone's like, wow, you've really gained weight. I'm like, oh, yeah, ouch. Yes, you're right. Um, it's one thing to have our feelings hurt by something, but it's another to let it negatively impact our self worth. So that would be the boundary of, okay, this hurt my feelings. It may or may not have some truth to it, whatever they said. Uh, but it doesn't have to hit so deep that it negatively impacts my self worth. That's game changing. So for a lot of people that do grow up in boundaryless environments, uh, they're not used to that. So that's new information for them of, oh, I never thought about that. Because everything, when you grow up in, like, especially in a boundaryless environment, it's like having a house with all of the windows wide open. And you've got some, mean people throwing rocks. And instead of bouncing off the windows, they're just sailing right in and hitting you inside the house and realizing, oh, okay, like I can close the windows. I don't have to let this stuff come in to such a deep level that it like deeply, deeply scars me. So yeah. Uh, yes, Chris, I agree completely. Says boundaries don't work in abusive relationships. Yes, this is the thing. So a lot of talk about boundaries, and I'm really glad that you brought this up because it is a very important point. When we're talking about boundaries, the I guess like the fundamentals that need to be there is that person um, has to be capable of treating others with dignity and respect. So they have to have that in order to respect your boundaries. Because if they don't, because our boundaries are an extension of us. So if a person doesn't respect us, well, then they sure as heck aren't going to respect our boundaries. So, and then trying to get somebody who doesn't even respect us as a human being to respect our boundaries is, uh, like that's just an exercise in frustration on our end. And unfortunately, a lot of like couples therapy, a lot of talk about effective communication. There is this talk about, okay, being assertive and boundaries and this, that, and the other. That only applies if that ability for both people to have dignity and respect for each other is there. If the other person has such a malignant or pathological personality that they don't care and they're so detached from the relationship, especially if there's ever been physical violence, like that's such an extreme sign of uh, disrespect and violation of another human being that it is not the boundaries. um, the focus for boundaries needs to be off of uh, this hurt my feelings or this is not okay or whatever to physical boundaries. Like you need to get away from this person. So, focusing on effective communication or, um, the basics of adult behavior, like it's not okay for you to, to hit me or to yell at me or to put me down like that. Like all of that's just it's rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic kind of a thing. Like the bigger issue is this person's very dangerous and they're unpredictable and they have boundaryless behavior. This is a huge problem. And this behavior tends to escalate because it's already extreme. If a person is this volatile and their behavior is already it's so out of control. I mean, we expect kids by the time that they're in first grade, really, to have a grip, right? Like you need to be able to control yourself and all of your bodily functions, to not spit on somebody, to not, you know, to be able to control your bladder, to be able to control what comes out of your mouth, to not cuss at people, to not hit, to not do, to be some degree of socialized, right? If that's not the case, um, and that child has significant behaviors and they never get that down for whatever reason, and as an adult they're still boundaryless in relationships, that is so it's so extreme that it's not going to be fixed within a relationship. If anything, it's going to make them more defensive, um, because they're already coming from a place of entitlement. They're already their worldview is just very twisted around, and um, and you're continually at harm, in harm's way. And not only that, but even if it's not physical harm, that constant emotional harm, like it's damaging staying in relationships like this. So yes, boundaries uh, boundaries only work if a person has some understanding and belief that boundaries are appropriate. So yeah, good point. Let's see here. Grisbear was saying how to keep boundaries from becoming walls. That's the balance I'm trying to find. Yeah. And it's a process, and sometimes I guess that's the thing, is taking off the pressure of there being this end point. And and that can feel overwhelming. I get that. But if you can look at it in terms of uh we are all on this journey, and a life worth living is a life that's full of self-exploration. It's who was it, Socrates, Aristotle, you know, um, kind of the whole know thyself. And an unexamined life is a life not worth living. And I agree completely with that. So unfortunately, it often takes these deeply painful experiences to shake us up to such a point that we do start to question everything. And th- that's that's unsettling, because as human beings we're wired to gravitate towards safety and security. But when everything is so shaken and uncertain, we have a we have a lot of anxiety about that. And so I guess just kind of realizing this is all part of it. All of this uncertainty is the whole journey towards self exploration. And it can be frustrating for sure, but it can also be really rewarding. And a lot of it has to do with changing your perspective on things. So trying to change the mindset from like judgment of, oh man, I thought I had this down. I can't believe I'm here again. And, you're getting so hard on yourself, to replacing that judgment with curiosity of, oh, this is interesting. Or I didn't realize like that this wasn't working. I thought it was, or I thought this was appropriate. And okay, now I realize I need to kind of revisit this boundary, or um, what have you. So it's just an ongoing process. Mystique says, I don't know who I am anymore. Well, and I think that's very, um, it's a common theme in after relationships like this, for people to just not know who they are. So, because it can cause so much anxiety of, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am anymore. Uh, One of the things that I encourage people is to think about your life in terms of chapters in a book, and you're the author. And because the reality is, who you were 5 months ago, 5 years ago, is not who you are today. So we can spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out who we are, but really it's more, the catch with that is when we're trying to figure out who we are, we're really figuring out who we were. Does that make sense? So there's kind of this sense of like futility with that process. I personally find it more helpful to think of it as, okay, well, who, just moving forward, like a clean slate, who do you want to be? in this next chapter of your life. So we're always at a place of reinventing ourselves, of growth, taking up new hobbies, um, or new friendships, starting new things, ending other things. There's always that process of ebb and flow. So figuring out, okay, who are you in this next chapter of your life? And thinking about things, I had this whole like long drawn out process. You've probably heard it before, like the zero to 10 scale, and kind of gravitating towards those things that really juice you, that are more of a 9 or a 10 on the scale. That's one way to look at it. Okay. Marie Kondo just sums it up so perfectly with asking yourself, does this bring me joy? Does this spark joy? I love that. And if it does, that's your 9 or 10. Go in that direction. And if it doesn't spark joy, so if you've ever seen her show, she helps people to clean up their environment, to tidy up their home. And it's very interesting. So then people are realizing, oh my gosh, all of these clothes or these books, they no longer spark joy. And so then she has this process of having them thank the item for the purpose that it served, and then releasing it. And hopefully it can go find its way to somebody new, and it can spark joy for them. And I just felt like that was a really healthy way to kind of ride those ebbs and flows of um, our own emotions, but also just the stuff in our life, because we can get stagnant holding on to things out of nostalgia or obligation or guilt or all of these reasons other than joy. So really getting clear, okay, is this sparking joy? And and if it doesn't, okay, then it might spark joy for someone else. And it can be, I think, easier to let items go, um, knowing that it could go spark joy for someone else. So yeah, thinking about, okay, well, what would spark joy for you in this next chapter of your life? Maybe it's taking up crocheting or aerial yoga or uh, voice lessons or learning a new language or all of the above. Yeah, lots of different things. Um, let's see here. Shay was saying that she went to the dentist recently, and the dentist was asking her lots of personal and unnecessary questions. And I immediately felt myself tense up and like I wanted to get up and walk out. That's interesting. I had a similar experience not too long ago. I went to go get some skincare stuff done, and the doctor that I went to was doing the same thing, asking me these personal and unnecessary questions. And the only thing I could think of was that she was trying to kind of get an idea of how much money I made to see if she could upsell me on things. But it was very awkward and uncomfortable. And I'd never had somebody kind of be so relentless in asking me questions about, the details of my life. Carol is saying, yes, my adulterous spouse keeps saying, but I don't want a divorce. He did the crime and he thinks now he can bypass the time. Yep, that's very common. I knew a gal once whose husband had cheated on her multiple times, and um, after like the second time, uh, anyways, she was seriously considering a divorce, and he was so upset, and he'd made the comment about, how can you give up on us so easily? And I just, oh my God, that's so manipulative and it's so ridiculous. Like she's not giving up on you. Like your behavior destroyed the marriage. Like, of course, there's going to be, it's wild to me how people can spin things and just completely lack accountability like that. Okay, let's see. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll. Mm, Chris, that's interesting. Chris says, I too feel lost. I feel observe, don't absorb. Let him abuse me more. It helped to see it, but not make them less hesitant to abuse. I never met someone that would outright say, yes, I abuse you and I won't change. Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how any, I guess, kind of any advice or strategies to self protection can be kind of twisted in a way that has the opposite impact. This is one of the reasons that I do book club is to take again, I get it. I was there where people are looking for resources and then you're reading it kind of through this lens of being being in a very dysfunctional relationship and perceiving things in potentially a dysfunctional way. And it can help to have that interaction with other people, um, to where it helps to clarify that because it doesn't take a lot. It can only I mean, it can just take a phrase like that taken in um, kind of the wrong context to keep a person really stuck. And um, the observe, don't absorb technique, it's it's still within the context of boundaries. So it's getting ourselves to safety. I mean, that's always the first step, whatever that might look like for a person. But then seeing that person's behavior for what it is, which is their behavior. It's a reflection of them, not absorbing it, meaning it's not a reflection of you. So no matter what you did, it's not okay. They can feel frustrated and angry and entitled or however they might feel, but it's not okay for them to lash out at you or to try to control you or for that to spill out onto you. So that's the difference there. Uh, I could see how the concept of observe, not absorb, how a person could kind of just stay there and think, okay, well, I'm just observing this behavior and, um, you know, and how the abuse can continue. We were talking about religion and everything earlier. One of the things I realized several years into my healing journey was um, I was very, and I still am, I guess, very interested and big into Buddhist teaching. And there's a lot of power and beauty in the whole similar process of detachment and kind of it is what it is, and releasing judgment and these kinds of things. But you take it just a few degrees to the left and that can really lead to this almost like nihilistic attitude of nothing matters and apathy and um, um, staying still when we need to be getting out the door. So it's a balance and it's a challenge and you're not alone in that. Okay, let's see. Um, let's see. Scrolling up, scrolling up. Mm. Embers is saying, my ex admitted to the abuse. He said it was his number one goal to stop, but a month later said it was now his number two goal. Number one was being happy, AKA continuing his abuse. Yeah. And here's the thing too with change. Change it tends to be a long process. And if you've ever tried changing anything, n- losing weight, quitting smoking, eating healthier, doing whatever it might be, writing every day, painting every day, learning a new hobby, it's difficult. And at the end of the day, we all want. Wanting to change isn't the same as changing, of doing the work of changing. So wanting to change isn't enough because we all want. So, and it's even if a person is doing the work of change, it's consistency that makes all the difference. So, I don't, for example, wanting to get sober, that's great. That's a big first step. Going to AA or counseling or whatever it is for a month, that's great. But they're still fresh out of the gate, and they're still learning new ways of being and kind of getting. I mean, there's just it's such a process, and it really takes years for a person to get a solid footing in into this new behavior, especially when we're talking about abuse or addiction. And the problem, if you think about addiction, addiction is more I don't mean to minimize this at all. Addiction is more cut and dry. People there's not a lot of confusion about what the problem is. It tends to be the substance, right? I mean, no, granted, of course, there's underlying reasons as to why a person um, starts using meth or starts drinking excessively or what have you. But I'm just talking about the solution for it. It tends to be stop doing meth, right? Stop drinking. There's not a lot of gray area there. It's stop. With abusive behavior, it's a lot more complicated because it's not such a concrete thing that you can point to and just say, you need to stop doing this. Because it's in part their mindset, it's their worldview. It's a very kind of imbalanced, pathological way of relating to other people. So and the challenge is because they're not gonna see it all right away. None of us are. When we're making a radical shift in our worldview, we're not gonna see everything clearly, uh, and so they're gonna have to have the level of openness and receptivity of examining their behavior from a place of curiosity and not defensiveness, which good luck, because that's incredibly difficult, especially with the person who's abusive, because they already have that bend in their personality of their primary defense is anger. So they have a lot of walls up. They feel entitled, they feel justified, they lash out. So anger, people we talk about fight or flight mode, they're locked into that fight mode. So it, like right out of the gate, that's huge. That's a problem because if a person's defensive, there is no connection that's going to be made. So it's breaking down that defensiveness. Um, they have to be open and receptive. They have to be aware that there's a problem. They have to be willing to work on it. And again, for most of us, right, we're highly motivated to work on something when we're suffering a tremendous amount of pain. So people with abusive behavior, it tends to be, or with addiction in general, tends to be with major consequences. They get a DUI. Their boss threatens to fire them. Their spouse threatens to leave. These kinds of things, it kind of shakes them awake of, oh my gosh, I've got to do something different. But as soon as those consequences, um, or I guess the fear of those consequences starts to soften, then the the amount of pain that they're experiencing quits driving their behavior or their desire to want to change. When we all go through this. So if you think, I mean, this is why it's so challenging. So it's a lot of major parts of their personality that they need to work on. And because they're not seeing it all at once, and because they can be so defensive, um, And again, any of us can. Like, even if we're not abusive, it's difficult it's difficult to accept criticism, even if it's constructive criticism. And especially if it's kind of this uh, unrelenting stream of it, of, oh, well, you're acting entitled this way, and it's not okay that you talk to me this way. And the result is then they start feeling abused and picked on because they're seeing it from their perspective, which is on the receiving end of basically, here's everything wrong with you. So, yeah, it's, I think a lot of people tend to think, um, with working with people with abusive behavior, um, it's as simple, or I guess with anybody kind of acting in a different way, it's as simple as saying, oh, yeah, well, if you want to quit being an alcoholic, you just need to quit drinking. Oh, you want to quit using meth? You just need to stop using meth. Oh, you just want to quit being abusive? You just need to quit being abusive. And it's not that simple, right? People struggle with these things uh, for years or decades if they ever are able to get the success in that direction that they're looking for. So realizing it from that point of view, it's not like abusive people with abusive behavior um, are acting this way. Uh, they're acting this way because assertive, appropriate, well-balanced behavior is not there. So it's unlearning, it's getting rid of these defense mechanisms, it's breaking all of this down, and then it's rebuilding a person. And that's quite the intensive undertaking. So I think seeing it from that point, it can help uh, to realize, okay, yeah, this is a massive, massive undertaking. And this isn't something that's going to change in a month or two or even a year or two. And they have to have that continual desire to bring conscious awareness to their behavior. And again, that's difficult for any of us to do. Like we were talking about with boundaries earlier, kind of getting your sea legs with that, where we might be doing something that's just not working. The difference is for those of us that tend to be on the receiving end of abuse, um, are getting in balance. We're only hurting ourselves. And with abusive people, their porous boundaries are hurting others. And you could make the argument it's also hurting them because, they're just destroying all of the relationships in their life. But um, so for us, we have more of a motivation to change because our behavior, especially our self-protective behavior, if it's not working, it's not working. So we're in constant pain until we get this more balanced out. Whereas they're not experiencing that pain because they're the ones dishing it. They're not the ones taking it, if that makes sense. Magalodora says, my ex-wife had 3 affairs and 2 years of marriage. I'm still suffering from the damage she caused, and it was such a long time ago. I don't know how to get past it. I guess when there's such that level of deceit and betrayal, well, I guess in general, I don't know if I view um, healing in terms of ever getting past anything. It's more about consciously moving forward, and that might seem like just semantics, but it really is a difference. So getting past something tends to, I guess, at least to me, tends to imply that it um, that you're over it, that it never impacts you, you never think about it, these kinds of things. Whereas moving forward from it is more of that conscious letting go of it. And that process will, like anything else, it's going to happen time after time after time. So every time you kind of come across these thoughts or these feelings about her or about her behavior, it's that conscious, um, acknowledgement of this is so toxic and this is so hurtful, and kind of making, I guess, assigning appropriate blame to it, realizing that her behavior was absolutely not okay. It's not a reflection of you or your self-worth. There's obviously something deep-seated within her. I mean, that's way outside the realm. Having affairs is outside the realm of normal behavior anyhow, but like 3 affairs in 2 years, um, that's extreme. So trying to kind of reframe, well, and maybe to acknowledging how you feel. Like it's perfectly okay to be hurt and to be angry and to be sad and to grieve for the marriage that you thought you had. There's definitely a time to do all of that. And, when we talk about kind of releasing anger and moving forward from an event, it it's a process, and that's what that process involves. And we could say, "Oh, man, you dodged a bullet," right? Thankfully, you were only in this marriage, for 2 years. And that's true, but there's still so much more than that. I mean, you went into it with, it sounds like, sincere feelings, sincere intentions, um, monogamy, um, that you loved her, and to have that level of betrayal is profoundly hurtful. And oftentimes, I think it's feeling those feelings and acknowledging that and grieving the loss of the marriage to the person that you thought that they were, and realizing, you know what, probably anybody. I mean, I had to do that um, with my ex, with Jack, and there was so much shame involved because people kept telling me, "Oh, you should be glad it's over," and he cheated on me. I don't even know with how many people, dozens of people. It was from day one. Like, he never felt anything for me. And, um, realizing I felt so bad because I still really cared about him and the life that we had together, but I had to realize this was all just a fantasy that he was kind of feeding into and creating. And anybody would like the guy that he pretended to be. Like, that guy was pretty awesome, but that's not who he is. And that kinda helped me separate those 2, and helped with kind of the shame surrounding that, and other people, and sometimes even ourselves, hindsight, we see things so much more clearly, and so that might be part of it too. I don't know. Tell me if it is or if it isn't, set me straight here. But, thinking of, "Oh, I should have seen this," or, "How did I not see this?" Or maybe other people making comments about that, which can really rattle us and kinda keep us stuck as well, of thinking, "Oh, I should have somehow done something different, or I should have seen this more clearly." And the reality is all any of us can do is the best we can with the information, um, that we have at the time. That's it, you know? Okay, let me see. Let me scroll down here. Yes, Huffle Mom is talking to Chris and says, my ex-boyfriend was like this. I can't count the number of self-help books I read trying to fix my relationship with him, to fix me when the problem was really him. Yes. And this is such a challenge. Again, this is one of the reasons we do book club, because it is, boy, I think if there's one um, red flag out there, it's that gravitating towards self-help books. So when we find ourselves kind of in this researcher mode of trying to figure out the behavior of others, or how to improve our relationships, it's worth digging a little into to see, okay, well, what's going on, and realizing, are we sharing, and examining, I guess, are we sharing responsibility? with the other person? Or are we taking 100% upon ourselves to make every relationship work? Because if we're doing that, then there's a boundary issue there. And our expectations aren't balanced or reasonable. So, and I've heard this from people time and again, thinking, "Oh, well, I want to make sure that I give this relationship my all before I walk away from it." And, one of the things, I guess one of the points I encourage people to consider is, if you could have fixed it, it sounds like you would have by now. So the fact that you've been turning yourself into a pretzel trying to find a solution and there still is no solution tells me that the issue isn't with you. So where is the other person's 50% in this relationship? What kind of effort have they been making or not making? Generally not making. So, let's see. Bricks and Feathers says about reading self-help books. I started reading self-help books at the age of 10. LOL. I was trying to cope with my dysfunctional family. Yeah, I don't remember how old I was when I discovered them, but I was hooked. And this was years ago. I mean, at least I was, I mean, when I remember thinking, oh, um, something's different like between me and other people was I would take notes on all of the books that I was reading. And this was like 20 years ago. And I thought it was weird that other people didn't do that. And I thought, well, how do you remember everything that you've read? And then it kind of caused me this level of anxiety when people were like, "Oh, I I don't." Like they might remember one or two things from a book. And there's like, "Oh, no, no, I can't do that." Like I need to um like I just there's so many takeaways for me that I need all of them. And I need access to all of them. Yeah, so that's a sign. That's a sign that something else is something deeper is going on there. Renzo. Oh, hold on. I got to cough again. Hold on. Sorry about that. Renzo says, I used to feel shame for not seeing it coming. I know I just did not have all the information and the perspective of what's healthy behavior and what's abusive. Yes. And you might have heard this from me. You might have heard this, in kind of these healing, uh, well, videos, community, whatever you want to call it, or people talk about forgiving yourself. And again, I know for me, m- a handful of years ago, n- I took great offense to that and was like, what do you mean forgive myself? Like I did nothing wrong. And I twisted it to interpret it in such a way of um like I just felt like I don't need to take ownership in any of this. I got tangled up with a really manipulative person and it's not my fault, not my responsibility. And I still believe that to this day. Like that's not anybody can get tangled up with these people. So I'm not going to own that um because there's nothing there to own. But forgiving ourselves is exactly what you're saying of of forgiving yourself for not having the information and for not knowing the difference between healthy behavior and abusive behavior. And for some people, it's forgiving yourself for staying in such a hurtful situation for as long as you did. There's been a handful of other situations in my life that, um, that I was like horrifically mistreated. And so, yeah, forgiving myself and just thinking, oh my gosh, that's so sad. What was driving my thinking at that time? And that's sad that I ever had that thinking. that I thought that that was somehow okay or workable. And um, kind of the new the you of today looking back with compassion at the you of yesterday or 10 years ago. And that's very, very powerful. You did the best you could with the knowledge that you had at the time, and that's all any of us can do. Nobody starts this life, and nobody starts, especially starts this life at the finish line. So, this concept that there are these, um, people who have it all figured out, that doesn't exist. It really doesn't. And it's an evolution. It's a continual process of self-discovery and, um, just evolving. And look around even at society, and you think about the evolution of, um, kind of social norms, and everything is always in this state of constant evolution. Might look back, when my dad was sick, okay, back around Thanksgiving, and we were watching all of these old comedies. And I, of course, hadn't seen them since like the 80s. And I was horrified by some of the stuff that, it was just considered funny back then. And it was stuff that wouldn't really be considered funny these days. And I would imagine a lot of those comedians probably look back and they cringe big time because it's so obviously not okay at this time. So the point is, there's always kind of this moving forward process with how we view things, and hopefully it's more of a progressive type process. And we did the best we could at the time. That's all any of us can do. Uh, let's see. Embers is saying the Gottman principle is a married psychology or psycho a married couple who I'm guessing are both psychologists discovered that optimum healing can happen after the disrespectful person does 5 nice things to repair the damage. Well, and I think it depends on the context, right? So I've heard this before, not necessarily in terms of um, fighting within relationships, but with kind of undoing things. For every harsh thing that's said, it takes kind of five compliments to to kind of even that out. So I guess I've only heard this more in terms of context with working with children, but I guess it makes sense in any relationship. Uh, but again, I think it depends, like the weight of the disrespect, and the weight of the 5 nice things. So, I don't know, it's gonna depend on the person, right? Like, to me, if it's disrespect, that's such a core thing that's not gonna be that wound isn't gonna be healed with, like, flowers and candy or whatever is nice, a foot rub or walking the dog or whatever is nice, you know? Like, it needs to be in the same zip code. So, I mean, I think for most people, um that if somebody's disrespectful, it's I really think the way to kind of heal that wound is to address it directly and to have full accountability for it, and then to have this honest, compassionate discussion with the person that's been hurt by whatever was said, and have giving that added reassurance of this won't happen again. If it's intentional and it's malicious, I don't see how, uh, I mean, I guess with any type of emotional wounding, words only go so far, and they don't count for a lot. It's actions that make an ocean a that make all the difference. So if there's not, you know, like related action to repair the damage, uh, related consistent action in the direction of change, of that never happening again, I don't see how that would undo that. But again, what are we talking about here in terms of disrespect? Like quote unquote normal levels of disrespect, um, which I almost kind of think that's probably what we're talking about, not what we tend to talk about in this chat. Uh, like disrespect in terms of hurt feelings, I guess, is maybe what's more of a common, a more um, common understanding of disrespect. Again, I don't know. It's significant. It's apples and oranges kind of a thing. Actually, it's even bigger than that. It's, I don't know, apples and Volkswagens. It's two very different things. Uh, yeah, changing my life says I'm still surprised at how people don't have it all figured out. It's hard to let go of thinking people have it all figured out, especially if they are experts. Yes, and I think it's significant to talk about, um, because there is this idea that there are people that are closer to the finish line or that have crossed it, that are in these kind of enlightened gurus. And, um, we're all human. We all make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not learning and growing. And and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like this doing things imperfectly is all part of the process. Having vulnerabilities is part of being human. Um, learning and growing and struggling and um, all of this, it's the process. And the people that I know that I would consider experts uh, in the field of mental health are, man, they've always got their nose in a book, or they're going to courses or seminars. They have this thirst for knowledge, and they truly are like lifelong students. They don't consider themselves experts. And I think that's kind of a better attitude to have of, yeah, I'm a student of this topic. Because that's true, because you're always learning and growing and absorbing and questioning and, um, you know, and trying to absorb this information and then also live it. So there can be a very big disconnect. Um, And I know I get frustrated with myself when I notice that disconnect. I'm like, Dana, oh my gosh, you know, uh, you're talking all about boundaries, or you're talking all about, I don't know, relaxation or something. And here you were so stressed out earlier, or, um, and that, and that's really, kind of from this side, it can be very uncomfortable, which I guess is a good thing, because then that level of cognitive dissonance kind of pushes a person into taking action to resolve it. So, um, yeah, so I guess it's absorbing that information and then being able to express it authentically, where you're just living your life. Um, oh man, it takes so much pressure off too, to just be like, you know what, I'm human, and experts are human, and we're all human, and um, like, let's learn and grow, and let's share ideas. And um, it's that willingness to be wrong and to try new things. I mean, my goodness, like you look at Elon Musk, I think he's a great example of trial and error. He's always trying new things and has these ideas that just seem I mean, grandiose is putting it mildly. They're he's just such a visionary, and some of his ideas work and some don't. And he's okay with that. He just realizes it's part of the process. So, but yeah, it is weird when you realize that experts, especially in mental health, have their own issues. Like, oh my gosh, this person just got divorced, or this person just got checked in for drug addiction, or, um, you know, it, you realize, okay, everybody's human and has their own stuff. Yeah, changing my life says, oh my gosh, me. Now that I'm doing coaching, I talk about stuff I don't even do. It only makes me keep saying the stuff, knowing the info helps them. Yes, and that's something I really struggled with. Um, well, I still do to some extent, but for the first couple years of my channel, and maybe a lot of YouTube people in general that do YouTube or put out content or whatever struggle with this. It's kind of finding your place in this of um yeah, like who am I in this? And is this going to be like a vlog where it's more, hey, this is just kind of who I am and you're sharing your struggles, or is it coming from a place of more of credibility of, okay, well, I'm not going to share my struggles. I'm just going to be more informative. Or is it, and I guess with that too, is it coming from a place of being more friendly and then being more open with your own challenges in your life? Or is it coming from a place of being more professional where it's about the people that you're serving? And there's all kinds of there's just all kinds of questions that start to surface that, I mean, again, at least for me, I didn't even think about when I got going. And then I had all this anxiety for so long and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And that was why. Because I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm being authentic or not, or if it's even appropriate. Am I doing this channel to help? Like, is my role here to be supportive to other people? Or is my role here to be kind of transparent with my own life? Or is that even helpful? Is that kind of grossly self-referential and narcissistic? What's helpful and what role am I? Who am I in this? So I think it takes, and I don't even know if I still have a good like a good feel for that. But I guess at the end of the day for my channel, it's more about offering support. So you know, there's there's certain things, skills and things that I talk about that I still struggle with. I might have even struggled with earlier that day. And but I try to bring it up, and um you know, I don't lie about things. Like if I struggle with it, I'm honest about it. If it happens to come up. But and I don't know, maybe that should be more of a talk about just kind of the struggles with moving forward in the healing process, because we all have them and it is stuff that isn't really talked about. And so I think when people do start that healing process, it can feel very lonely, and it can kind of create a lot of this self-doubt of, what am I doing wrong? Gosh, these other people just seem to just kind of skip through adversity in their life, and they're just unscathed, when in reality they might be falling apart inside. So yeah. Oh, absolutely. Crystal says, is it normal for the healing to spread across the board to all different areas of your life, sometimes simultaneously? Yes. Healing and awareness, and I would say awareness is going to come first. So we tend to experience pain something brings to our attention that something in our life is not working. And of course, our attention's going to go there to figuring out, okay, what is not working? And it might be the relationship. Well, in our situation, it tends to be a relationship, a very toxic relationship with another person. And and again, very common for people to focus on that relationship and to want to try to understand this other person because that's the first a piece of awareness of, oh my goodness, um, not everybody is the same. Not everybody really wants the same thing because we're kind of all taught that people are inherently good and that you know kind of communication solves all the issues, family is forever, all parents love their children, relationships take work, and we go through life with these understandings, and that works with other people that agree that have been socialized with those understandings and they abide by them and they agree with them. It doesn't work if you get tangled up with a really manipulative person, and then it just drags you to hell, right? So it's so our awareness tends to be on that relation because it's really wild. It's like, oh my gosh, I did not this person's level of detachment and cruelty and deceit is so outside the realm of what we would consider normal problematic behavior. It catches our attention and it holds it. 'Cause it's like, this is just psychopathic. What on earth is this? I knew that there were people like this that kind of that I shared the planet with, but I didn't think that I would ever come across one. Or if I did come across one, I thought I'd be able to see him coming, like Charles Manson. And that's not the case. And that's terrifying. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out um, this relationship, these kind of, malignant or pathological personalities, what this looks like, kind of healing from the shock and the trauma of all of this, um, working through. I mean, it's just such a profound. It just causes so much damage in a person's life on so many different levels, and and then there's kind of this invalidation and potentially re-victimization from other people because they don't get it and they don't understand, and, they might be coming at you with platitudes. "Oh, all parents love their children, relationships take hard work," kind of it's so, you know, not it doesn't even begin to encompass what we experienced, and so then it's this process, and then over time, um, kind of realizing, "Oh my gosh, I see, like, it's not just because it generally isn't just this one area of our life, it's, "Oh my gosh, it's this area," and maybe and the reason we don't see it all at once is because it's it's at different degrees and um, different degrees and frequency of problems. Like, for example, our dating life, we might, um well, I'll give you an example from my own life. Which just tends to be backwards, I think, from a lot of people. My boundaries in relationships, I think were probably too rigid, and my boundaries with friends were too porous, and that was another thing that tripped me up for a long time because I was encountering all these other survivors that had very porous boundaries in relationships because 'cause they'd been so eroded, um, and that wasn't my experience with the 2 men in my it was when I was in high school, but it wasn't, 20 years after that relationship. So that really tripped me up. Um, but then kind of expanding how I understood boundaries was very eye-opening, and it's this continual like, it's a continual, I don't know, flowering of awareness, I guess you could say, or just kinda peeling back layers of an onion. It's ongoing, and it can kinda throw you for a loop. And then the good thing, though, back to what you're saying, Crystal, with healing, is realizing that, That is that's the good thing with positive change. You've probably heard the platitude, there's no such thing as small change. And that's so true because change, it builds on itself. And we might not notice a difference right away, but it's sort of like if you have a line, right, that's going out kind of indefinitely, and you adjust the trajectory of that line by just a few degrees, you're not going to notice a whole lot at first. But then in time, that difference becomes very significant and it makes all the difference in the world. So we don't need to have these massive changes to have massive impact in our life. Changing things, tweaking things just a little bit here and there for for the better can make an ocean of difference, and it builds. There was a YouTube video I was watching the other day that really summed up this concept well, because here's the thing too, when we start when our lives start working, we start these positive changes start taking root and we start reaping the benefit of them, whatever it might be, we want more of that. And so then it doesn't become this thing where we're having to push ourselves to make these positive changes. There's at some point, there's this switch, and then it's this pulling us. This just feels good to eat healthy and to exercise and to be out and, you know, running around outside and to, um, have to be around nourishing um, people. And the thought of even going back to these, you know, toxic behaviors or just deeply unnourishing friendships or relationships or what have you, it just loses all of its appeal. So we're like, oh my gosh, no, it does not do anything for me. But what I was talking, this video that I saw was something like, it was something like this guy did, I don't even know, like 10 push-ups a day for a year and how it changed his life. And so that was his entry point. And and I'm I don't even know if that's what it was. It was something along those lines of something that wasn't too terribly major. Okay. And he kept adding to it. So then that would kind of set the tone. So then it was okay, 10 push-ups every day. But then he found that he was also craving different types of food. And then he was getting to the point where he was flossing his teeth more and he was getting to bed at a decent time and his sleep was more regular. And it radically changed his life. Just this one little thing, 10 push-ups, you can do that in, you know, under a minute easily, 30 seconds even, had such a huge impact on his life. And oftentimes it's it's such a good start of just starting small. The the book, and I don't know if it was you, Gareth, who had mentioned it, but it's a fantastic book. Um, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about it and he says, a habit has to be established before it can be improved. And there's so many nuggets of wisdom in that book. It's just fantastic. You can find, if you're interested in any of this, like you can go on YouTube, look for James Clear interviews. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful interviews. Okay. Uh, let's see here. Let me scroll. Mhm. Okay. I think I've missed part of what's been going on here. Chris. Okay. is concerned about this relationship that he's in. I don't know where you are in the world, Chris, and you absolutely don't need to mention it here on the live stream, but I would what you're experiencing is very concerning. Um, it is very controlling and it's scary behavior. So I don't know. I guess I would just encourage you to contact a domestic violence agency in your area. Okay. Okay. Chris is a girl. Okay. Um, and also, I guess just um, uh, for those out for men out there, uh, a lot of domestic violence agencies, they more and more are helping men and women. So their shelters might only be for women only, but oftentimes they do have funds and they might put you up in another place. So even if they tell you, oh, the shelter is women only, uh, ask them if there's any resources or anything that they can do to help because there's a lot that are able to do that nowadays. JJ asked about the author. Yes, James Clear is his name. Clear. Atomic Habits is the book. Absolutely fantastic book. Chris says, what's concerning the control? Like, I feel controlled. Yeah. Uh, well, that his behavior is controlling. So, Huffle Mom says they have tried DV, they haven't been helpful. Okay, I didn't even see that part. The throat grabs. Y- Yeah, that's a drop mic kind of moment right there, like, or just that instant deal breaker. Yeah, throat grab is outrageous, outrageously inappropriate and dangerous and um, not okay. And you're saying the domestic violence centers haven't been helpful? Yeah, he watches everything I do. I can't even shut the bathroom door. Um, he touches the kettle to see when I last had tea. He made a set of keys for my car. Yeah. Yep. That's good advice. Embers says, she says, I guarantee it will get worse. Have a go bag. Make a plan. I escaped from his death threat in a strange city in winter by the skin of my teeth and ran to a shelter. Yes. So, yeah, having a go bag, a bag that's prepared with, at least a change of clothes and, um, if you can, put some cash away, if you can hide the bag, like if you have an attic or a box in the basement or keeping it at a friend's house or something. Yeah, and Huffle Mom is saying, really just don't think, just leave, and leave soon. Yep. And changing my life, that's good advice too. Says, whatever you do, do not mention you are leaving. Yes. This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges people have because they think they're still operating from this viewpoint of this is a a dysfunctional relationship with, um, deeply dysfunctional person. And but it's so much more than that. And like we were talking about earlier, when somebody shows you that they have that lack of empathy and that lack of remorse and that lack of kind of fundamental decency towards you or another human being, watch out. And the reality is they're not, there is no emotional investment for them in a relationship like this. It's all about power and control. They're very deeply problematic people. So trying to be rational with an irrational person is only going to put you in harm's way because they are going to freak out. Keep in mind, in their mind, you're the problem, not them. And they feel completely justified and entitled to mistreat other people because they have that immature uh, mindset and underdeveloped worldview. So yeah, uh, um, it's it's more along the lines of thinking about leaving a hostage situation than a relationship. Leaving a relationship, it can always be a little scary thinking, okay, well, I'm not sure how they're going to react, or I just, I don't want them to freak out. Um, or it's going to be really uncomfortable because there's going to be a lot of crying and it's going to be sad. But fear, fear is not a normal emotion experience in a relationship. So, especially that you're afraid that they're gonna hurt you or worse. Chris says, "I feel like a hostage." Well, I mean, um, and that makes sense because in many ways you are. Every move you make is being tracked and, um, you there is no level of autonomy. Missouri Cowboy, hello. I was saying he says, I needed to understand how others think. Part of being pathologically naive is projecting the way I think onto the actions of others. Yes. And this is something that's very difficult for really I think anybody to wrap their mind around. And there's still times I don't know if you've encountered it. I know I have. And you would think, well, my goodness, I mean, Missouri, you've been here a long time too. We've seen a lot and way more so than like the average person. And there's still times where it catches us off guard, where we're just shocked by the level of, or at least I am, like the level of just depravity or um viciousness of somebody's actions. It's it's just hard to imagine somebody could be um yeah, just so hateful or hurtful to another person or another living being in general. And this was one of um and I think one of the struggles that most survivors have is when they're reaching out for help, trying to talk to other people, and if somebody else hasn't even encountered anything close to this, they're also coming from that pathologically naive mindset, which can put somebody in great harm. Where if their advice is, "Oh, well, do you know what that person's love language is?" Or do you know, um, we need to work on effective communication or this, that, and the other. Like there's a time for communication and then there's a time to run. And effective communication doesn't solve everything. And it won't solve anything when you're dealing with a pathological person. So, because that's not the issue. Oh, that's a great idea. Truth seeker says 24-hour gyms are a great respite to get away and think. Yes. Jennifer says, is it normal to not recognize that you're traumatized even after years? Yes. I, because, right, because there's degrees of trauma, and it's also going to depend on when a traumatic event happened to us in our kind of development, emotional development, I guess you could say. So, um, and this is kind of what I was saying earlier. It's like peeling back these layers of an onion, um, or pulling a string on a sweater. It can just there's always more. There's always more to it. So what's catching our attention now is what is generally causing us enough pain that we're motivated to address it and ideally be able to resolve it. But once that's done, there's going to be other things. Like kind of the next wave is going to surface, and um, there's going to be other things that kind of catch our attention that may or may not be related to that. We're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I was impacted by this event, but sure enough, this is how this happened, or this is kind of the outcome of that. And then once that's addressed and resolved, then other things will start surfacing, and it's just that's just the whole process of um, kind of getting to truly know ourselves. That I forget what the estimates are, but something like 90% of our behavior is driven by our subconscious. And that's why it's kind of this never ending thing, because it's not conscious. We're not consciously doing these things. It's fascinating. And this is why it's so important to bring compassion to the table when you're going through all of this, because it's very difficult uh, to start doing the work of peeling back these layers. Um, you know and there is time of kind of looking back and grieving for time lost, or grieving that our life it could have been different had we had information earlier, and kind of making peace with that, and um, having um, not letting this healing or this newfound awareness rock our world so much that it kind of sends us into this deep depression, that we're able to um, you know kind of take all this knowledge and balance, mourning the loss of what was or what could have been, and um, having this level of acceptance for where we are now, and this level of compassion of um, it's there's still uh, so much good in the world, and there's still so much good within you, and there's still so many good days and events left in your life, and um, moving forward in a positive direction. Sable Minor, thank you. It says visualize world peace. Small change for you, Dana. Oh, that's cute. Well, thank you. And thank you for the live stream donation. I appreciate that. So yeah, Jennifer, it takes kind of that level of continual examination of um, and it's hard, man. It's hard to be honest with ourselves of what is not working in our life, and why is it, and what do we need to be doing different. And um, if there's certain thoughts that play into that, just getting curious, where did these thoughts come from, that things should be a different way, or what does this mean, or what could it mean. um, yeah, for many people that experience trauma when they're young, and most of us, I would say most people do to some degree, is, when you're young, you're kind of just this blank slate. So these messages, especially if if these events, these traumatic events are happening at home, it it's doesn't seem abnormal, um, or we may not realize how it's negatively impacted us until we're significantly older, and then we're around other people's families, and then we're made more painfully aware of kind of what our own uh, did or didn't have. We see the difference more clearly. But with developmental trauma, that is kind of this challenge. It's like the saying goes, the last thing the fish notices is the water. And if a person's always been in, this environment, they don't know anything different. And so it's not until we're in a different environment, especially with developmental trauma, it's not until we're in a different environment that you realize, oh my gosh, this is so uh, generally this it's if we're coming from like a toxic or yeah, some sort of degree of toxic or abusive home life, you get into an environment that's not that, and you feel like you can breathe. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so nice." Like everybody's sitting around, they're having dinner together, they're playing games together. Like these people, they all turn to each other for support. Like, what is this? Like, am I in the twilight zone? This is so weird. And uh seeing like a functioning family, uh then it also kind of it's validating in some ways. It's sort of like, well, oh my gosh, no, I'm not crazy or difficult or maybe the reactive behavior, like reactive behavior from children. It's not just because this kid is um like a bad apple or just bouncing off the walls. It tends to be a response from certain needs that they're not getting met. And um yeah, so okay, let's see. Gideon has a question. Jack is trying to get my attention. Oh, Missouri Cowboy's also trying to get my attention with it. So, Gideon asks, I am getting angry and this urge to take revenge on a narcissist. How do I stop this feeling? um, I think realizing, there is such a thing as appropriate anger. And it's reasonable and healthy and appropriate to be angry if somebody's violated you in some way, shape, or form. So we feel how we feel. And especially if our feelings are healthy, given the situation. And this is what can be so challenging because for a lot of people, they've never felt this level of anger before and they don't know what to do with it. So, um, I can just share kind of my own experience here. What helped me with that was to really embrace that the best revenge is a good life. And also to realize this person is not worth going to jail over. So, kind of making that clear with yourself. But the best revenge is a good life. It truly, truly is. There's so there's so much energy in anger. Don't let that go to waste. But turn that fire hose in a direction that it's going to be beneficial. Because right now you are at that fork, that proverbial fork in the road where you can go down one of two paths. And this anger can very easily and understandably, frankly, destroy a person. That it can turn into bitterness, jadedness, um, where it just is all consuming. Or you can use this anger, the energy in it, as kind of like rocket fuel, basically, to help take you to the next level to make your life really work for you. So, trying to thinking ahead of time, like thinking soon, today or tomorrow, of um, areas of your life that could really benefit from this level of energy being directed at them. This is known as there's a term for this. It's known as sublimation. Um, and it's a great way to be able uh, to channel to channel really uncomfortable feelings into something that's not destructive, into something that's productive instead. So I've given the example before. My brother is a personal trainer, and he was the one that was telling me about, he's like, Dana, don't waste the energy of this anger. And he has so many clients that would come to him that were in, some of the worst shape of their life, and they had hit this rock bottom. Their spouse had left, they were getting teased or bullied. Some majorly painful event happened, and they were at the point where they were just so hurt or they were so angry. And he would keep encouraging them, take this anger and make it work for you and put it into the gym, put it into the treadmill, run it out. This is your life. Like, make it count, build it, use this all for like your highest and greatest good. Don't just use nourishing things for your highest and greatest good. It's a game changer when you start realizing that you can use everything that comes downstream at you for your highest and greatest good, and in time for the highest and greatest good of others. So, especially those that are struggling, or, um, that you can kind of relate to their journey. So, it's very empowering. Um, what some of the things that I did was, uh, I exercise, organizing, cleaning, uh, painting, cooking, uh, home repair. I literally painted my entire house inside and out. So, like, I mean, you just got to go burn off that energy, but don't waste it. Like, it's easy to just to get lost in, I don't know, drinking or drugs or stuff that's just wasting time. Invest your time into something that kind of yields dividends. Does that help? I love that. Sapphire says, I just needed you all to know that there is hope and your life can and will get better. Yes. And that's a game changing realization of that you might feel forever and profoundly broken right now, especially if you're fresh out, or if you've been trying to find your way into healing for quite a while now. And but realizing there's all of these little changes that you can start taking, and reinvesting this energy into your life and getting clear as much. And the thing too is you don't need to have all of the clarity. You just need to know the next step of, okay, well, what's nourishing for you in this moment, or what's nourishing for you at this time in your life, and moving towards that. Um, that's how you start making your life work for you. It's one step, one decision at a time. Here's another quote from James Clear. Is he made a comment something along the lines of, every decision you make is a vote for the person that you want to become. And I love that. Love that. So, thinking about it in those terms and realizing, uh, while your life can't go back to the way it was, it that's actually a really profound and almost beautiful thing. So we can only ever go forward in life. There is no going back, regardless of what happens to us. Like, there is no returning back to where we were, because life's not designed to be that way. It's always about moving forward. And so there's a lot of freedom in that. If you realize, oh, okay, I don't need to try to get back to who I was last year or 5 years ago. I need to figure out who I want to be in this next chapter of my life, and then start working to make that happen. It takes a lot of the pressure off, and kind of, I think, makes it the journey a little bit more clear. Yeah, Gideon says, "Thanks for the answer. It's a support medicine for me." Yeah, you're very welcome. And I hope that, if you come back next week, this is a chat we do every Wednesday night, and I'm probably going to sign off here a little bit early because I feel like I'm losing my voice. Uh, but we do this every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I would challenge you to think about ways that you can take this anger, this righteous anger that you have. It's reasonable and appropriate, again, to be angry when somebody's violated you. I would challenge you to think about ways that you can direct the energy in that anger into something positive for your life, and to let us know next week what you've come up with. I would be curious, and I think other people here would be as well. That's your challenge if you choose to accept it. Gideon says, from your answer, I think I'm going through this and almost done because I gained around 12 kilograms in 4 months after going no contact. You know, there's so many lessons that we can squeeze out of relationships like this. And one of them, I mean, like one of the many is when we notice that this relationship has had such a negative effect on us, like, oh my gosh, I've gained all this weight, or I started drinking more than I like, or more that than is healthy for me, or I started, um, numbing out with Netflix or whatever we might be doing to self-soothe to such a degree that we can't justify it. We're like, wow, I've gained like a significant amount of weight, or um, my life is in some sort of state of disrepair. Squeezing out the lesson of uh, that you will never be in a relationship like this again. That's powerful. That's really, really powerful. And I think that's another way to kind of help with the anger is when we can start squeezing out all of these lessons and making the pain of this relationship work for our highest and greatest good. We're using the pain of this as rocket fuel, as fuel to get us to the next level. That can be incredibly difficult to do, and that by no stretch is minimizing what you went through or somehow saying that it was okay, or any of that. It's acknowledging what happened was outrageous and it was profoundly hurtful and it was not okay. Absolutely not okay that you were mistreated to such a level. And now things are going to start being different. Now that you realize that this is how um, these relationships are out there, and that these people are out there, and that we don't always see them coming. And this is how we can tend to get hooked in, um, really doubling down on that you have value. Like you have value as a human being and you have worth. And any relationship that requires you to sacrifice your dignity is not worth being in. And the right person for you, like the right people, like your people in life are the ones that are going to be nourishing. And when they do have like a hard truth, they're going to approach you in like a tactful, um, helpful way, So like I guess that's kind of a wake up call for so many of us of like, you don't need to settle. You don't need to compromise like that. Those are not your people. We don't know who they belong to, but those are not your people. And it's the problem didn't start with you, and it's not gonna end with you. That behavior is is gonna continue. I mean, it's so wildly outrageous. It's just not how problems are ever effectively handled, you know? Whatever they might be doing, lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, on and on and on. The level of deceit, all of that, it's so, um, you know, not your fault and not okay. And I'm just human being to human being. I'm really sorry that you went through this, but keep moving forward a step at a time, a day at a time. It does get easier with time. I will say that. You won't the pain of this won't always, and the anger won't always be this intense. So I guess hopefully you can find some peace in that. UNA asks, are you still doing the live collabs with Angie on Thursdays? Oh, no, that was just a one-off thing. Yeah, that was just a one-off thing because we weren't able to go that Tuesday. Chris is saying the counselor told me he did not value me. That hurt. Yeah. And it can be helpful to realize that, and I think that this next book that we're going to be discussing, I'm going to be kind of jumping out of order here a little bit. Um, this book on attachment theory, it really makes these concepts so much more clear. And understanding that people that are more on that avoidant side of the spectrum, especially like malignant avoidant, um, where they're just malicious. Not all avoidant people are malignant or malicious, but those that not everybody attaches to other people or forms bonds the same way that you do. And so realizing that there's different types of attachment styles out there. And so, Chris, what your counselor was talking about um, when they were saying that um, this person, your partner, doesn't value you, it's it's not you. It's not because there's something um, wrong with you. It's that your partner, this person who's abusive, does not know how to effectively attach and bond to other people. And when I talk about this problem didn't start with you and it's not going to end with you, that's why. There's these um, deeper attachment issues at play. So realizing, okay, and there is no greater pain, I think, than being in love with a person or having this relationship with a person who is a kind of that malignant avoidant type, because there are no deep roots there. There is no emotional investment. And but realizing that it's not a reflection of you or your worth or your lovability. It's a reflection of them and their inability to bond and their inability to love. Magaladora says, aren't some avoidant people avoidant because they've been hurt so much that they're now afraid of other people? Yes. And so that's what I'm talking about. There's avoidant, like I would consider myself that person. Like, I was probably anxious to begin with, and then my attachment style, after just going through enough to the point where I became avoidant. But I'm not malicious or malignant. It's just, uh, you disconnect to stop, to just prevent from being hurt. And it's a whole process of learning to reconnect. Not even learning to reconnect, but um cultivating emotionally safe dynamics with others, and kind of learning to discern the difference between emotionally safe people and emotionally dangerous people. And uh, yeah, it's ongoing. It's an ongoing process, ongoing work. Oh, thank you, Crystal. It says for the live stream donation and says, "Thanks for being you." And it's a cute little pear. Ah, I this must be a new thing with all of these little like emoji people, but they are so cute. Yeah, Megalodora says, "Yeah, me too." He says, "I'm just scared of other people." Yeah, yeah, I get it. And it's hard, it's hard if we don't know what appropriate trust looks like and how appropriate trust is built and how an emotionally safe person behaves versus an emotionally unsafe person. Again, this stuff's not taught. So, you know, th- it's not like there's a bunch of people out there that just have it all figured out because just intuitively they don't. They don't. They might have certain chunks figured out, but I guarantee you that they don't have it all figured out. So even people that have that secure attachment style, this is one of the things I'll get into with this book club discussion. And this has been my ongoing kind of peeve with this is secure attachment doesn't equal or is not synonymous with um, like a healthy person, like a functional person. A person can have a secure attachment style and be kind of like what Missouri Cowboy was talking about, this kind of pathologically naive. So they could run headfirst into relationships and have this attitude of, I trust the world and I lead with love. And, you know, I'll take risks and, love like I've never been hurt and the world will catch me and support me. And that's okay until it's not, right? And like, but they don't realize that can be a problem until it becomes a problem. So to me, there's a difference. Um, there's in attachment theory too. There's secure attachment style, and then there's earned secure. My 2 cents on that is that is yet another attachment style that I call mature. So earned secure, again, my 2 cents on it is it's when a person learns these skills in order to develop that secure attachment style. However, because attachment style is often really not framed in the context of boundaries, standards, deal breakers, self-love, secure does not automatically equate to um, functional behavior. And I think it needs to. Um, or it's just like it's going to eventually be a problem. So to me, a mature attachment style is attaching to bonding to other people in a mature way. It's understanding that um you know the people we don't know. You've got to take your time to get to know people, and that yes, while people I think you could even say people are inherently good, or that there's a vast majority of good people out there, but even those good people could have some deeply dysfunctional behavior. And so important that we know how to have and create healthy bonds with other people, and that comes from maturity, not just from a secure attachment style. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. So, yeah, there's a lot to it. Attachment theory, fascinating stuff. We can talk about it at next book club, which I don't know when that'll be because I'm thinking about changing up some videos on how I do that. Jennifer says, I actually used to have that attitude when I was younger, like a 17-year-old setting out to go into the workforce. I just wanted to trust everybody. And I still to this day have issues with that. But I'm more quick to remember that everyone is actually way more selfish than I'm used to. Yeah. I mean, you know, I fell into that too. I was shocked when I was in nursing school and Um, it just never even crossed my mind to think that you could have nurses, um, who were so mean, like eat their own young level of mean, who were just psychopathic, who were out to literally like out to get students and fail students. And it was this weird power trip. And I don't know what their issue was, but it was horrific. And we had nurses like that as instructors, and we had nurses like that during our like clinical rotations. So that, I mean, it was very eye-opening. I just didn't, to me, those kinds of people didn't, they weren't nurses. So it was very eye-opening that, oh yeah, no, they are. Um, just realizing this world is a mixed bag full of people, and it just takes time. And the thing too is we all have, at any given time, we all have hidden biases to some degree. And that's part of that whole personal growth process of these biases, because they're hidden, we're not aware of them. So it we don't realize how much they're driving our behavior until we come across situations like that, when we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that nurses could be evil, or whatever it might be, that somebody would get married and have no intention of being monogamous, or it just this behavior that doesn't compute, because we just tend to take certain things as truth, and really a lot of what we take as truth or not. It's just kind of um, these hidden biases that we have, and when we know different, we can do different. um Mystique asks, Dana, where is the line between psychopath and malignant narcissist? Is there any difference between them? There are differences. However, I would say, I don't know, relatively minimal. So with narcissists tend to be more, um, their egos tend to be very fragile. So perception is a big thing for them. How society perceives them, how they perceive themselves. They can't handle criticism. They lash out. They rewrite reality to make themselves either the hero or the victim. Um, they are living in their own little bubble where they are the king, kind of a thing, or queen. Um, there's a lot of grandiosity. It's diluted delusions of grandeur, the belief that they know, um, you know, they're the smartest person in the room, kind of a thing. That they're, and the thing is, there's no, uh, like they're not open to constructive criticism. They're not open to sincere self exploration. These kinds of things, and so it's very easy to trigger like an ego injury, and even accidentally with a narcissist. Whereas a psychopath, there's not that, they're not so driven by their ego. They're driven, like, they don't care. Like, they're not gonna go to any great ends to alter perceptions, society's perception of them or whatever. Like, they are who they are, they don't care. You don't like them, kind of whatever. Uh, there isn't that same level of, like, ego injury, um, uh, driving their behavior, but there's still that level of, um, ego in the sense it's, well, I mean, just in that level of narcissism that it's, you know, feeling justified or entitled to do whatever they want to do. There's that lack of empathy and remorse, lack of empathy, lack of remorse. Um, I think in many ways there tends to be more self-awareness from a psychopath than there would be with like a malignant narcissist. Narcissists, I think you can see them coming more. They're more bratty, entitled. I don't mean this to be politically charged, but Donald Trump is a perfect, I mean, textbook example. You couldn't write, like, you couldn't write a story uh, with him as a villain because it wouldn't be believable because it's so outrageously over the top. But that's, Kim Jong Un. Um, these kinds of extreme, I mean, these are just like extreme overt personalities that are very destructive. But do you notice, like, the level of grandiosity? Like, uh, I was hearing something the other day that Kim Jong was saying um, that he never went to the bathroom. Like this level of delusion, right? Of saying, okay, well, I'm so superior that I don't even have the bodily functions of a human being, kind of a thing. Like, that's extreme, but very fragile ego. And it's all about self-perception. Whereas, you know, psychopaths don't care. Sociopaths, it's kind of more, and I'm sure there's more differences. I'd have to sit down and really think about it. Sociopaths, well, and supposedly with psychopaths, there's more um, brain differences, brain scan differences, uh, lack of activity in empathy and remorse areas of the brain, overactivity in kind of um, other areas of the brain. Um, Again, like even for like clinician purposes, kind of being in that ballpark of like malignant narcissist or antisocial personality disorder it's a problem. So, like, clinically, even though clinically, if you were to say talk about the differences between like a narcissist and antisocial personality disorder, um, the narcissist is going to tend to be more self-absorbed and kind of thinks that they can do no wrong, whereas antisocial, it's more of this manipulative, exploitative, destructive behavior, destructive to property, destructive to people, kind of thing. So a lot of and there's a lot of overlap. So I kind of tend to use a lot of these terms like interchangeably when if I use them at all when we're discussing this. Um, yeah, does that answer that question? Oh, Jennifer asked, what book has the attachment styles in it? So the book that we're going to be discussing for book club, which I'm not sure when that's going to be, but the book is called Attached. So it's called Attached, and it's there's like a magnet on the cover of it. What is the person's name? Let me give you their name. I don't like not being able to say that. Let's see. Attached. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. And it's a great book. Great, great book. So let's see. Angeline asks, how can you tell the difference between a narcissist and a borderline? So, um, each personality, well, not even each personality disorder, each disorder listed in the DSM has uh, has like a list of criteria. And kind of within that list of criteria, then there's more of like defining characteristics because there is a lot of overlap between behavior. So with borderline personality disorder, some of the more significant features of that, it's extreme fears of abandonment, either real or perceived, and um, very like labile moods, so rapidly shifting moods. Um, um like what's the word I'm looking for, struggling with no solid sense of self, um tends to be like a history of unstable interpersonal relationships. um they tend to go from uh idealize to devalue. It's very, very black or white thinking. They either love you or they hate you. Oh, you're the best, I think you're such a wonderful friend, to I hate you, you're mean, you're cruel. It's this push, kind of push pull. So um, whereas narcissists, they're not driven by fears of abandonment. There might be rapidly shifting moods. There there might very well be a history of uh, um, kind of difficulties within interpersonal relationships. But the primary features of narcissism, it tends to be just this grandiosity, um, lack of empathy, lack of regard for others, um, kind of feelings of superiority, um, these kinds of things. So, and here's the thing too, is the DSM can be a lot like WebMD. Okay. So like I'll just forewarn you. If you're Googling things, especially with DSM kind of stuff, um, human behavior is at the core, it's human. So we all have some of this behavior to some extent. It's all on the spectrum of human behavior. It's the degree and frequency of a person's behavior um, is when it becomes concerning. So we might have, I mean, it's very common for people um, that have gone through like childhood trauma or um, an abusive relationship, that they have feeling loss of sense of self, or um, a shift in their attachment style. Um, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of overlap between PTSD or CPTSD and borderline personality disorder. And um, you know, so and there's a lot of overlap between it, and it can take a little while for a clinician to kind of figure out what on earth are they dealing with. And again, even there's still the human element that comes into play, and that clinician's own hidden biases. It's a very real thing where I guarantee you, I would be curious. I'm sure this is somebody's, well, maybe I'm not sure, but like, I'd have to look. I'd be curious to know if somebody's done research on this, where really it's just been my experience, okay, that it is like ridiculously disproportionate number of women that are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, um, whereas men aren't. Like that tends to fly under the radar, and it manifests differently in men and women, like kind of a lot of things do. So, um, you know, it's we all think we all have this idea of what something is, what a narcissist is, what a sociopath is, or what a psychopath is, or what bipolar looks like, or what schizophrenia looks like. And odds are it's probably a stereotype. that we're basing that assumption on. And it's very eye-opening when you realize, oh no, this is a full spec. Everything is on a spectrum from mild to severe. There's people that have schizophrenia that you would never guess it in a million years. Never guess it. That they're they're able to get on the right medication, they're fully functional, they're able to hold a job, they have a family, they are um, they're completely fully functional and everything's in balance and they're doing great. And then there is an extreme where it's not that, and they maybe don't think that they have a problem or they can't find a medication that works and their life is just this uphill challenge and they are very kind of dysregulated and disheveled and so it's just like that with any mental health issue. So um a fair critique says, I've always referred to my husband as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Is that associated with narcissism or personality disorder? Those extremes, yes, both. Again, it depends on like the degree and the frequency and kind of what's triggering those switches within him. Is it um, power and control? Because that tends to be that narcissism component. Or is it low blood sugar? Is it, uh, unhealed trauma? It could be any number of things. It could be multiples of things. But really, like with personality disorders, it's and there's different clusters. So there's three main clusters of personality disorder. There's cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. And each cluster is kind of known for has its own defining features. So we tend to talk about a lot of behavior that is cluster B, which is considered like dramatic, erratic, and emotional, and in all shades of that within that cluster. And um, cluster C, I'm trying to remember. I don't deal with that often. Is more like schizoid or odd or um, what is it? Odd or anxious? I believe odd, anxious, or a combination of those two, which would be like schizoid. And then I'd have to go. I don't remember what the defining character traits are for cluster A. Um, oh, it's gonna bug me. Hold on. I hate it when I draw a blank. There we go. Odd, eccentric, odd or eccentric. Oh, I was wrong. Cluster A is schizoid or schizotypal, paranoid. Let's see. What is cluster C? Anxious. Okay, cluster C is anxious or fearful. So let's see. What was the question here? I forget. Oh, okay. Sorry. It's been a long day. Um, so you have these different clusters have different kind of defining features of them. And then within that, you have, uh, I think there's a 10, I believe, total personality disorders in all. And in total. And so each personality disorder has its own criteria. And out of that, a person needs to kind of fit, I don't know, like 5 out of 9 ish. Okay. And then, and it'll say for each one, okay, like this kind of needs to meet X number of criteria out of this list. And then, then there's kind of other criteria to keep in mind. Like it can't be this person's behavior is to such an extreme that it's negatively impacting their life or the lives of those around them, kind of whether or not they realize it. It's their behavior is doesn't fit in with cultural norms or their age. Um, it's and it tends to be rigid and persistent. Is also kind of some defining characteristics of personality disorder. So it's they're it's ongoing. So they're like this in a variety of situations. And this is what can be so challenging, especially for like uh, I would say antisocial personality, from more of like the self-aware antisocial personality. You can normally see borderline personality disorder for what it is. And more of like the overt narcissism, you can see it for what it is. But the real, I mean, you've got the antisocial, which can really fly under the radar, like the Bill Cosbys of the world. So, it's hard to kind of get a feel for something when you've got, okay, in this category here, you have Bill Cosby and Charles Manson. Right? Like there's a big difference between the two of them personality-wise. And that's why it's so difficult to see because it's not one size fits all. Okay, so let's see. Ava was saying, I still fear my ex showing up at my house. Is that a sign of PTSD? Well, it can be. I mean, it's definitely a sign of trauma. PTSD, there tends to be four uh, kind of, again, like defining features for it. And I'd have to go, it's late and I'm getting tired and the little hamster on my wheel is slowing down here. Uh, but, like there in each subcategory of it, like ruminating thoughts, kind of hypervigilance, um, intentionally avoiding things that are triggering. Um, so it's more than just one thing that's going on that would constitute PTSD, but it's understandable. It's definitely a sign of trauma, and it's definitely a sign of hypervigilance, and it may or may not be appropriate. I would encourage you to err on the side of caution, because that's the thing when you're dealing with somebody or you've dealt with somebody who has shown you that they have a lack of empathy, they have a lack of remorse, their behavior has really no boundaries, and um, they're kind of unhinged and unpredictable. Yeah, again, their behavior is dramatic, erratic, or emotional. That's a free for all. That's anybody's guess. So it's appropriate to be like, I'm really nervous um, because I feel like this person could just show up. I'm concerned that their behavior is going to be unpredictable. That's reasonable. If you've been around somebody who's shown you that their behavior is unpredictable, it's reasonable that you would be concerned about seeing more unpredictable behavior from them. So all any of us can do in that situation is to err on the side of caution. Um, it might be a good investment if you haven't already to consider getting some cameras installed outside of your house. You can find them on Amazon, dash cams, front and rear dash cams that start recording whenever there's like movement or activity around your vehicle. Um, these kinds of things, keeping some sort of self protection nearby in case, making sure, change your locks, making sure the areas are well lit, and that maybe your neighbors know that, um, you know, um, if they see anybody on the property to call the police, kind of a thing. So it's difficult. It's challenging. It's challenging to return to that sense of feeling safety and security when there's still this kind of unknown threat that is potentially prowling around, and um and this is one of the reasons some people move, is it because it can get old very quickly of just always looking over your shoulder or wondering when they're going to resurface, or uh, and it's difficult, and it does take a toll on you, on your mental health, to continually be in a state of hypervigilance like that. So at this point, kind of doing what you can to reduce, um, to err on the side of caution and to reduce stress as much as you possibly can, and to make your environment as safe as you can, um, is, is worth doing at this point. So, okay. So with that said, Kenneth, hi. He says, "Have you thought any more about doing ASMR videos?" I have. I have. And I will be speaking to Paul and checking my email here in the next day or two. Paul and I were talking about doing some different videos and what that might look like. So, okay. So, with that said, um, let's take some time to kind of get recentered and grounded, and uh, just centered within yourself. So, take some time to find a comfortable spot and to either close your eyes or let your gaze soften. Allowing yourself to be still and breathe. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Turning your attention to your five senses, noticing what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, and what you feel. Feeling the air around you, noticing if it's comfortable or slightly warm or slightly cool. Feeling any fabric that's against your skin. Noticing if it's thick or thin, soft or rough. Feeling the weight of your body as you allow yourself to continue to relax. And continuing to breathe. Visualizing a white, healing, restorative light deep in your chest, And perhaps it starts out the size of a golf ball. And this light is your inner light. It's everything that is good and right within you. And with each breath, allowing that light to grow bigger, become more expressive, and allowing it to flow easily and effortlessly out through your arms, down through your torso and your legs, and realizing how big and just wonderful this light is. Feeling it come through the top of your head and the tips of your toes and the tips of your fingers. This beautiful, healing, restorative light that's just easily and effortlessly and beautifully moving around every single cell in your body, nourishing and healing and restoring. Visualize that light almost just hugging, hugging every little cell, acknowledging all of the work that goes on behind the scenes in our body. It's all working towards your highest and greatest good. And how beautiful is that? And letting this light flow out into your environment, into the atmosphere, connecting to everything else that is good and right in the world. Feeling what that depth of that feeling is like, of just complete peace and bliss, beauty, nourishment, knowing what a gift, what a gift this life is, and the gifts that you have to bring to this life. That there is so much that is good and right with you, and that there is only one you. There is so much that is lovable and valuable and absolutely worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. And allowing those words to sink in and just become a truth, become as much of a truth as anything else. That the sky is blue, or that the grass is green. These are just basic truths. You have value, you have worth. These are also very simple, basic truths. And embracing, allowing yourself to embrace that feeling of knowing that you have value and worth, and that you don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to try to earn it or achieve it, that it's there. It's inherent within you. Bringing that light back into the core of your body. And perhaps it's maybe the size of a softball. Or perhaps it's still flowing around every cell in your body. Whatever's the most comfortable for you, or wherever that light needs to go. Realizing that you are always connected to this larger force of things that are healing and restorative and good and right in the world. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. Okay, guys. And thank you so much. That's a great idea, Kenneth. I will add that to the list here. Um, thank you so much for your time and the support of each other in the chat. It's really much appreciated. And just all of it, contributions, questions, concerns, everything that's been brought up. It's warmly welcomed and much appreciated. So I will see you guys next week. As always, lots of love to you. You are not alone and you are not crazy, and you can move forward and heal from this. So take care. And again, yes, and thank you, moderators. Thank you, Crystal, for mentioning that. Yes, thank you, moderators. Okay, good night.